Welcome to my June 9th, 2026 webinar, My Approach to Serious Disease. Um, Over the course of the last couple of years, probably, but certainly over the course of this year, uh, we being about halfway through this year, I have come to systemize a bit my approach to working with people who have serious disease. Um, and the more I've thought about it, the more I go like, yes, of course. But it all comes actually from my doctor's training, which was to use a systematic approach to finding out what was wrong with a client, a patient, and then figuring out what to do about it. And one of the things about working with people with serious disease as a physician um, is you have to break bad news, where you go into the room looking very serious and you say, you come in here with these concerns and this is what we found. And then, excuse me, you say things that people really don't want to hear. And one of the things I learned very early in my training is that once you have said what is wrong and what the concern is, people really don't hear much of what the rest of you say, what you say. People don't hear much of the rest of what you say. There we go. But our approach is kind of set. Whereas we collect a history, we interview a patient, client, and gather a whole bunch of information about them and their families and family history and their personal history and exposures to anything and the, both in terms of infectious diseases, but also like ticks, which are very prevalent right now. I have ticks on my mind because I have a couple of tick bites this year already for those really tiny ticks. Um, so the I got off onto ticks. Uh, we have to break the bad news, and then in the same breath, basically, in the same sentence, you just keep talking. You have this, and this is what we're going to do, which is usually what we're going to do next. Um, but you always give somebody the sense of this is where we're going, which is to say, we know how to handle this, we know how to work with this. So in my work, I've really come to get a deep sense of how we handle this, what we're going to do um, to find out what's going on with you and deal with it. And this is very important because in my work, finding out what is going on with you is not the same as it is in medical practice. In medicine, we diagnose primarily physical conditions, also emotional ones, really not spiritual ones. In my work, that's all part of the range of possibilities, and indeed, it becomes necessary. We need to find out why you have what you have in the sense of where that energy came from that is producing the physical, emotional, or spiritual challenges that you're experiencing. Um, and so we've developed, or I have come to use, a very systematic approach. The first thing I do is to look for signs of energy disturbance that come out as a person is talking about their history. It shows up in their speech, it shows up in their body physically or in their body language, um, in the way they convey information. And so part of my training and my experience are to be able to hear what people say. And I've said this before, I'll say it again because I think it's a really important part of understanding uh, a systematic approach. People don't usually hear themselves say where the energy is in their situation. They don't actually know that. Sometimes they do, but usually they don't. But I'll pick that up and I'll say, now you said that that was a painful situation in their history. And and they'll say, yeah, it was very disturbing. It upset me, and it hurt a lot physically. Um, and it went on for a long time, and then they start telling you more and more. Um, and so gradually, I'm able to discern where the energy is situated at that point. Now, when I say that, you've probably all heard me say it's sometimes like peeling off layers of an onion. You get one layer, you work with it, a new layer emerges. So what I find is a starting point. And I'll give you an example. Later, I'll go through the whole detail, but it's something that's happened to me so many times, and I just kind of love it when it happens because it's just so charming. And what happened was that somebody said to me, "Oh, I have this problem," and immediately I saw there was a disturbance in their energy field behind them. And it's a really striking thing when that happens. And I've had that kind of experience happen to me so often, where sometimes they're not even talking about themselves. The person say, "Oh, I have a relative or a friend with such and such a problem," and I go like, "Yeah, there's this kind of energy disturbance in their system, and that's something that I can work with." Because that's what I do. And it's just very matter of fact like that. So, this client said, "I have this problem." And I said, "Oh, I see this thing behind you." And I said, that gives us a handle, so a way to start working with you to change the pattern so that you can heal. And fortunately, I knew the person pretty well. They didn't go like, "Oh, that's really weird." They responded favorably, and I did work with them. I'll tell you that story uh, as we get further into the webinar. Um, so the first thing is finding where the energy is disturbed. That's step one. Um, and that's a really profound step. Now, sometimes we don't really get that. We may get a hook in, we may get an indicator of, oh, there's some disturbance in some areas of some part of their energy field. But that may not be the whole story. That may only just be a glimpse. And then we have to work with that more. So the second step is basically working with what comes intuitively, working on the subtle level, not the gross level of the body or where it's in pain, but working on the subtle level. And so we start by receiving information, taking in information, whatever comes in. And I was trained to be completely open, whatever comes in. And again, many of you have heard me say that I'm very much a left brain person. I don't have much imagination, basically none. Um, and so whatever comes in, whatever shows up in my awareness, I can take as significant. It means something. And so it's something I can work with. So I start by looking for energy patterns, energy tangles, and disturbances, different kinds of things going on, um, blockages, particularly, and as I call them, tangles, where there's energy that's all uncoordinated or incoherent. And so I can start working with that, and seeing, being curious about it, seeing what shows up, and just being curious about it, just being open to that, whatever it wants me to know. Another thing that I routinely do is to check along the client's timeline in this lifetime and in past lives. There's some other things I check too, but I won't go through the details of that now. But checking along their timeline and just seeing, where there are things that might give us a clue as to why they are suffering in the way that they're suffering now. That usually goes remarkably quickly. It doesn't take very long at all. And it's like I can kind of just do a sweep and, present, going back, going back, going back. you know, birth, gestation, because things happen or karmas appear in, well, there's the baby still inside the mother, and then past lives, what's happened in the past that we might need to deal with in the sense of where there is energy that is present today that came from past lives that we need to deal with. Sometimes we find that similar energies appear in multiple past lives. Sometimes there was something, an event, usually a very painful one in some way or other, in a past life, in just one event that's causing this problem today. There may have other things going on, which may cause other problems or have caused problems in the past. But right now, this is what we're dealing with, what's showing up in the present. And so when we're seeing these things, what we're doing is identifying karma. And then we have techniques for working with whatever happened in the past to shift the subtle energies so that the energy that's manifesting in this lifetime and in this problem today is something we can get to work on. The approach I usually use is known as interrelationship focusing. And it was Gene Gendlin had developed focusing, and then one of his, oh, I think it's fair to call her a student, um, uh, refined an approach that the way she liked to do it and called it interrelationship focusing. She's still teaching. Her work is really excellent, and I learned a great deal from her. I've attended quite a few of her online presentations, excuse me, and um, I've learned just a great deal about it. But when we're doing that kind of work, we work from what is known as presence or being present, which means observing from the level of the transcendental self, which we write with a capital S, observing from that level to see what is going on. Observing from that level means that our attention is benign. We bring no judgment. We bring no evaluation. We're not trying to change anything. We're gathering information. We're seeing what shows up. So, what is it about things that happened in the past that are showing up today? We call that karma. Um, and so we bring presence to the situation. We bring curiosity. We bring our attention to a situation, but we make no judgment. We don't try to change anything. We don't label things good or bad. They just are. And so things show up. And sometimes I can relate to a client what I'm picking up and seeing if it seems relevant to them. And on many an occasion, a client will begin a process which I call symbolic processing, where a story starts to unfold in their mind. They see things start to happen. They don't have to be rational, but again, we just are watching them from that level of presence. So there's no judgment, no interpretation. So I call it symbolic, but we don't try to work with symbolism like the way a psychiatrist would do that. He'd say, well, that represents, you know, some attachment to your mother or disturbed attachment to your mother. It's always the mother, right? No, it isn't. It's sometimes the father or a whole bunch of other people. Uh, Symbolic processing, and just let the client tell this story that appears in their mind. This is not the story of their illness or their problem. This is the story that shows up. It's like their fantasy. And we don't worry about whether it's true or not. We'll never know. And it doesn't matter. And we don't analyze the story. We just let it happen because the story itself is the client's processing of the energy that is causing their problem. It's a beautiful way of working. Not everybody will do it. I don't invite them to do it exactly. It's just we set a stage, so to speak. We create a situation where they can take off and do it, or not do it. But some people are really good at it, you might say. Their mind will just go into a story and it will process, and then they will transform the energy that's causing their problem, and they'll feel better. So in this second step of identifying what's going on, sometimes we can just let the client just process on their own, and it takes care of itself. Fundamentally, what we're doing is making peace with the past. Making peace with the past. Um, Now, usually it's because we have done something, you might say, that today we might not be proud of. And so we offer contrition, we offer compassion to those we interacted with in the past, um, and basically we make apology. And sometimes we use the technique known as Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian word and a Hawaiian technique, which is basically 4 steps, which we repeat over and over until a transformation takes place. It works on the energy level. It's not an intellectual process, but we have to say the 4 phrases. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. It implies I love you unconditionally, no judgment. And I am grateful. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. And I'm grateful. So we make peace with the past. Now, sometimes when we have hurt others, they have taken it badly and they have told us, and we may not have heard it, but they give expression, often out loud, that they are very angry with us, they hate us, and they want bad things to happen to us. Sometimes they want direct revenge, meaning they do it. Sometimes they just wish bad things upon us. Sometimes they formalize that into a curse. I will send that energy to you. There's various ways of doing it. I don't really know how to curse people, but it happens. Sometimes it's just the feeling of what they have, the enmity that they develop, and they carry that. And that can be through lifetimes. Uh, but what comes down to us today is that energy that they have sent our way to bring us back that karma for what we had done to them. So dealing with curses is a thing I do a great deal. Again, they're not always formal curses. They're off most of the time they're just feelings, bad feelings, intense bad feelings. And these can often prove to be very difficult to work with, particularly if it isn't just one person and one incident. That's a big thing like a war, conflict, civil war, um, kinds of things that go on and on and on, pardon me, causing a great deal of misery. There are times when um, foreign energy comes to us. Uh, I hesitate to use the word because it's kind of scary for most people, but the idea that there are entities, um, and they sometimes come in. I will give you one or more examples this evening when I get to the examples part of it, the stories, and they can be uh, they can be relatively benign as they just show up, or they can be like really evil um, entities who have malice towards us. That is not from our past lives specifically. It's like they have their own thing. It doesn't happen very often, and I've told stories about that in the past. I'm going to spare you that right now. Um, there are patterns that come down to us through our families. And oftentimes we have participated in a family story of maybe abuse or just the way parents treated people or neglect. Maybe there's patterns of like divorce that have happened generation after generation. Um, And those create an impression. There's energy wrapped up in those things. We call those familial patterns. And oftentimes we have to go into the family and try to fix that. And sometimes it comes down to a person and they have an opportunity, so to speak, to fix it for the whole family. They're going to change the whole family's karma by correcting the familial pattern. So that can be very exciting thing to deal with. So we deal with that on the energetic level, and then we deal with that on the manifest level. So I have to move to step three, the actual we're changing things in life. And then there's another kind of karma, which I call life lessons. They are the things that you come into this lifetime to learn. So a situation is set up in your life, and you are supposed to learn a lesson from that. And there may be more than one situation in one lifetime, but most of the time there's one major one, something that you want to work on in this lifetime. And so we may have to identify those life lesson patterns and then work both on the subtle level to change them and on the gross level. So those are big things. And typically we're bringing acceptance and gratitude to such situations. Acceptance that, oh, this has happened to me, but it's so I can learn and grow, no matter how unfortunate or painful it may be. There's a lesson in here for me to learn. Most people kind of rationalize that. It's like, well, it's God's will, that this happens to me. And so we accept it, but we're miserable and we don't really learn anything from it. But it is possible to learn things. And so we try to figure out sometimes what that life lesson is supposed to be, what that energy pattern is trying to bring to us, and then we work with that. And then I have the next thing I have down here is managing physical injuries, toxicities, immune problems, um, finding the underlying pattern of the energy that has led to these specific things. So may have to identify particular karmas. We may have to identify what the energy pattern is that's causing the problem. This is particularly true with autoimmune diseases. Um, there may be reasons why we have them, and those can be discerned, but we may have to also just work with the subtle energies that are in there to change that. And one of the first clients I ever worked with, can't say I knew a lot about what I was doing then, but I did it, and it worked. And they had an autoimmune disease, and we completely transformed that, and they got their life back. So it took a lot of sessions because, like I say, I didn't really know what I was doing, so it was kind of slow. Today, I could do that much quicker. And then one of the things we have to do when working on the subtle level is to request that clients, helpers, and our own, and guides, and even masters um, transform energy patterns. Sometimes we have to invoke knowledge that we don't actually have to transform a disease pattern. We invoke a great surgeon or a great physician or a spiritual healer or other such person to come in. And sometimes it's angels and archangels and things like that. So I've worked with all of those over the years. That's quite interesting work, actually. But that's not, so to speak, that's not me doing it. But I can ask for that help, that assistance. I basically ask for that all the time whenever I work on somebody. It's like I'm hoping that my guides will show me what I need to know. And they're pretty good about it, I have to say. They do a good job of bringing to me the information that I need to help people transform whatever energy pattern is affecting them. So then the third step is to work with the physical body directly. Um, there is a book which uh, disappeared when I had the Great Flood called The Healer's Handbook, which is big thick book. It's printed on 8.5 by 11 paper. It looks like somebody actually typed it out and then just copied it, photocopied it. Anyway, the Healer's Handbook is a compendium of symptoms, diseases, problems that people have, and the emotional underpinnings of those things. So you might say this disease represents this. So when I see somebody, um, I kind of ask the question. So if you have this kind of a problem, what could be, what is likely to be causing that? What kind of thing has gone on? And sometimes in the past, I've actually taken the book out and shown it to people and asked, do you relate to any of these things that may be listed as causes of this kind of a problem that you have? Unfortunately, I don't have the book anymore. It's possible it's in my storage unit. I need to go access that. But now the weather's gotten hot again, and it's really hard to work in a storage unit, which has no air conditioning. Um, and then another way of approaching the physical body that we use, this is step 3 stuff again, um, is to install healthy energy patterns, uh, which can come from this world. There's a joke in the healers field. It's like, dear God, please make one hand like the other one. In other words, you have to specify what you want. But you can bring a healthy pattern of energy in to replace or to supplant a pattern that the person already has and bring about a transformation. This can also come in from a parallel universe. The concept of parallel universe, um, which I've presented in another webinar, but I'll just very quickly summarize, is that we get to points in our life at times where we can choose one path or another. We can go left or right, and um, oftentimes it means that we get to make a choice. It's not up to us. There's a wonderful movie in which a woman rushes to catch a subway, and it's very close. So then the movie goes forward, alternating back and forth between what happens if she does not get on that subway, how her life will unfold, and then how her life will unfold if she does get on the subway. And so you have these two stories going side by side, back and forth. The way the movie does it, they go back and forth between the two. Um, and then eventually she has to reintegrate, and that's an important part of it. So a lot of times, if there's suffering in one lifetime, we can check to see if in another lifetime, another universe, there's suffering in one universe. I said lifetime. There's suffering in one universe to see if in a parallel universe, their parallel universe, there is a different pattern that we could bring in to this universe. So that's a nice energetic trick. Um, And then, of course, we get our masters, helpers, guides to transform energy patterns. I repeated that because it works on both the subtle level and the gross level. Um, and we can use things, there's all kinds of tricks, colors that we can use, lights, sounds, crystals that people use. Crystals are very popular. Stones, I use stones in my practice. I have quite a collection. Many of you who've visited my home have seen them. Um, and each of the stones has its own particular qualities, things I can use for healing. And that's all done intuitively. I don't give people the stones. It's all just done intuitively. I take the energy of the stone and install it in the person's energy field, um, which I say very glibly because it's easy to do, but it sounds kind of cool when you think about that. Oh, we take the energy of the stone. So every once in a while, the work kind of like, oh, it kind of amazes me too. And then there are various healing frequencies that can be in any form. Um, in matrix energetics, Richard Bartlett basically cognized 21 frequencies that he uses in healing. It was one of the first things he came up with and put out in his programs. And so I use those. Again, it's done intuitively. I just check to see which frequencies are appropriate to use and where to put them, where to install them. Some of them go in the whole body. Most of the time, they're localized in the body. And you go like, how? And it's just like, yeah, intuitively. It's like, and that frequency goes there, like that. It's one of the reasons why I like to see people on Zoom or have them present with me, either way, so that I can kind of see them and then I go like, oh yeah, that part there. Sometimes it's off screen, but I still know where it is if it's attached to their body. Okay, so those are the kinds of approaches. Those are the steps that we go through. First, looking for what energy patterns are present. And they can be anywhere. They don't have to be in a person's body. They can be in their immediate aura, which a lot of people work with, or they can be much broader, much further away. Um, and so when I start, I usually do a scan of the whole universe, so to speak, just anything and everything, whatever shows up. Step two, working with what comes in on that intuitive level, that subtle level, from the level of presence, observing from the level of presence, and bringing a non judgmental awareness to whatever is there. And then the third level is working with the physical body or emotions or the spiritual dimension of a person as an individual. You might say the grosser level of that. So, my goodness, I have gone on at length. And now we're down to the examples. So, I wanted to share with you a couple of stories from clients that I've seen recently that illustrate this step by step approach. Um, and the first story I'll call the case of the missing brother. So, I mentioned earlier in my talk that a person had a problem and they came up to me and we just kind of started to chat and I said, oh, I just told him right away. I said, I'm seeing this energy behind you. There's something going on that's the kind of thing I can work with. And they were interested and open, and so we started working together, and it was just one of the most fascinating things I've ever done. So something shows up behind my client. We sit down together and start to work. Um, and it's like I'm curious. What is this? What is this energy? What is this thing about? What is it? What am I supposed to know? So I just use that kind of curiosity, those questions in my mind, to kind of tune me in. And I sit down and transcend, settle in, uh, and I'm getting the sense it's a client's brother. It's a brother. So I ask, and they don't have a brother. Never had a brother. Not aware of any brother. It helps to know the client was the youngest child in the family. Um, Never had a brother. And so I'm working with them and I'm going like, this energy back here behind you, it's a brother. I'm quite sure of it. It's very clear. Um, and I'm just kind of with that energy and I feel some ease and that energy moves into my client. Well, I've had that kind of thing happen before, not with brothers, but that they've had displaced energy or that they are not localized in their body. That's a really interesting thing. I didn't mention that at all. I have mentioned it before. Sometimes I'll start to work on somebody and I'll find they're not in their body. So I get curious about that. You know, where are they? Oh, they're up there or back there or off to the side or they're hiding somewhere. And what's the story here? Why, what's going on? And then I'll learn about that. But this was not my client. This was my client's brother, and so the brother connects with them. Well, that seems like a good thing, but on the other hand, the brother should exist independently. So I was like, well, could this be a twin? And no, it's not a twin. This is probably somebody either was wound up as a stillbirth or died in early infancy, maybe a crib death or something, or sick or just sickly or whatever, didn't make it. check with the client. No, no history, no awareness of it whatsoever. Never talked about in the family. Well, there's practically no family left. Might be a sibling, might know, an older sibling. Older siblings might know, possibly never knew. So I'm continue the working, and I find out, yeah, this brother's really attached to my client, and they're kind of integrated into my client. It's like they're living through them, and I'm going like, it's not malicious. It's attachment. It's not being able to move on and have their own life. They're attached. This is strange. So I worked with that for a while, and talking to the client, I did quite a bit of conversation with the client, who couldn't provide much information, but came up with some things, and I checked in then with the parents who are deceased, and checked in, and by golly, they never really grieved. They lost this child and didn't talk about it. They just closed it off. This, by the way, is not a rare thing. When there's a pregnancy loss, or an early childhood death, first month or two or three, um, many times parents don't talk about it. Sadly, it's one of the most common causes for divorce. Is the parents are they shut themselves down. They're no longer a functioning couple, and unless they get good counseling, they can't get back together. They're you know Sometimes there's blame back and forth or whatever. But anyway, so the fundamental issue here, it seemed, was that the parents never grieved. The child didn't have a funeral and a burial and it was like that was it, gone. Um, and so, um, you know, I we did a little work around that, and um, there's a little more work to be done. But anyway, that's kind of how that story was. That we were just missing this brother. So um, the client knows that the brother needs to move on, but we can't throw the brother out until they're ready to move on. And it turns out it's the parents that are holding the kid back. So we'll continue working with the parents and try to get them to accept and let go. Um, the next client that I want to talk about is one who I found holding on to resentment and seeking revenge for old wounds. And then the kicker was, and for foolishness. So the story that unfolded when I went in and checked on the history on the subtle level, client had no awareness. Um, they were suffering from pain in the body. And we quickly identified that that was from an old wound inflicted by a much more competent combatant. They had somehow gotten into a mortal combat with somebody that they never should have. They just weren't up for it. And when I saw that, was reminded of the movie or the story Shane, if you ever read the book. There is a farmer who is very mad at the gunslinger, and the gunslinger did something. I can't remember what it was. And the farmer challenges the gunslinger to a shootout, where they face off with each other and draw their pistols and fire. And there's no way that this farmer could possibly beat a gunslinger. Just no way. And of course, the gunslinger says, don't do this. This is stupid. And the guy, yeah, well, he's really angry and really hurt and humiliated. And so they face off and the gunslinger kills him. So this person had gotten into this conflict, this fight, was seriously injured, uh, but didn't die right away. And so there was survival with suffering, and then that evolved into considerable bitterness and resentment and desire to see the warrior, the combatant, suffer. All of which it turned out was that, they had to deal with their own foolishness. And so we had to work to relieve and let go of the bitterness and the suffering through acceptance. Um, it was a complicated thing. The story got even more complicated, but fundamentally, we had to go back uh, to the combat. It was quite violent, um, and we found that the opponent was mean and demeaning, and that this person, had to live with this defeat and this crippling injury that eventually took them. Um, and so there was a certain shame and humiliation, and also, as I said, foolishness. They began to realize this is why the thing was so complicated. They began to realize that what they did was really stupid. It was just foolish. And so this comes down to the present day, because there's a part of the person that is rejecting the part that was so foolish for engaging in combat with a skilled fighter. What a complicated story. The rejecting part, this inner critic, firmly believes that its job is to keep my client on course, meaning moving on with their life. It's afraid to let my client, the other part of my client, go on with its life, because, just on its own, because it's foolish, because it might get itself in trouble again and have to relive this terrible thing. Um, a strange thing happened. This is related, but I still don't fully understand how this came to be. So I'm working with the client and trying to clean up all of this conflicting energy, these parts that are literally at war within my client, that my client has no awareness of. Um, and I see an entity above my client. And again, this is an opportunistic entity, not malevolent. It's not there to hurt my client. It's just got a chance. And so I have to get rid of it. And the way that I did, I don't know how this happened. Like I say, I have no imagination. It just happens, right? I gave it a thorough tickling, like it was a little kid, like it was a neighbor's kid. My sense was it was a neighbor's kid. Um, and so, it was kind of enjoying the tickling. It really, was, stop, stop, and they're laughing and giggling and just carrying on, having such a great time. Finally, it's exhausted and it's had enough, and then I let it up and it leaves, and in leaving, it frees my client. It was such a curious thing. It freed my client to be able to deal with the stuff inside them. So it's seemingly foreign energy was part of the foolishness and the, getting all bent out of shape kind of stuff. So finally, in examining, I found that the heart still held on to grief and regret. And so I used another kind of trick, which I don't use very often, but it just came to me to use at that point, which was to create a large square wooden table right in front of my client in my mind, and brought the grief and the regret forward. And in doing so, kind of created some space between my client and what they were feeling, this grief and regret that was inside of them, which they were not aware of. So brought that out and had to end the work at that point and promised to come back and finish with them. But my client may be able to do that on their own now that they have some perspective and some space, some presence to deal with the stuff that was so intimate to them, so very deep inside them. Um, I wanted to talk about another client. I'm going to just talk about one part of it. Um, so this was a client who came to me because they had cancer. Frankly, they were in very bad shape. Cancer was advanced. They were having complications. Not a good situation. And so, among the various things I had to do was to work with the fears that surround the diagnosis of cancer. Being diagnosed with cancer is generally fairly terrifying. If people are not terrified outwardly, it's usually because they're sitting on that feeling inside, which is not a good thing. So one of the things I had to do was to help clarify and move this energy around the fear of cancer. So I listed 4 aspects of this fear. First is the fear of just naming it. The word itself conveys or generates fear in people. And so that has to be dealt with, right? Because it gets in the way. Because you usually can't keep putting it out there. Now, you'll see some people who do, are fairly open about, I have cancer. But most people are pretty closed about it. They don't go out much, and they may not be able to go out much, but, they tend to hold it all kind of inside. So fear of naming cancer. And of course, the next thing is fear of death, which is ceasing to exist and no longer being part of this world. And that can be kind of abstract within somebody, but it's a fear. It's a very definite fear. They fear that they're going to cease to exist. Now, I know a lot of meditators, they go like, oh, I know about afterlife and transcending and moving or shifting from one plane to another. And, I'm not really afraid. And that may be true. Um, but almost everybody has some feeling about no longer being part of this world, unless they're quite old or their life has just reached a point where they're not really living the life they think means life, living in the way that they think means being in this world. So that tends to be true for most people, though. Then there's the fear at the beginning of pain and suffering, which then becomes real in many cases. The medical profession has gone a long way towards making treatment a lot less painful and with a lot less suffering, but there often still is some, and my client is having to deal with that, so that's a very real thing that I had to work with. And then the fourth aspect is the fear of loss of ability to live fully, that is, of having disability from the disease and the inability to follow one's dreams. I'd like to do this. I'd like to travel. I'd like to play ping pong or whatever it is. And, you know, you can't do that anymore. You're facing disability as a result of the disease or the treatment. And then I didn't make it a separate category, but, the fear of the treatment um, is perhaps one that we could add to that. Fear of side effects of treatment. I'm just adding that to my notes. So I have a record of that. Very good. Okay. I've gone on at much greater length than I thought I would, um, which in some way I'm proud because it means there was a lot to say about this subject. But we do want to do something of a group clearing session. So before we do that, I just want to see if anybody has any questions. I'm going to check the chat here. That's usually the best way to do that. Ah, okay. Um, the comments that I'm reading are actually not relevant to what I'm talking about, I think, unless this last one rang true with some of you. So if there's any comments or questions, let your fingers fly. Otherwise, I think we will end this recording here. The next webinar, if we have one, um, is scheduled for July 9th, and I do not have a topic yet. I'm facing a certain reality or an uncertain reality that I have done over 100 of these and have covered many, 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 many topics, and I'm not sure I have anything left to say that I haven't already said before. So, if anybody thinks of a topic, something they would like me to talk about, please let me know. But still not seeing any comments or, yeah, anything in the chat. I will end this recording. Hopefully, we'll see everybody on July 9th, and hopefully, I will have a topic at that point.